As a pre-teenager, I had a friend down the street who invited me to hang out with him one day. We were playing around and he invited me in the house. He said, "Come upstairs, I want to show you something." We ended up in the master bedroom, and under the bed, he's like, "Check this out." And he pulled out these magazines. And, you know, I'm an 11-year-old kid and I've never seen this before. I mean, it's Playboy and there are women in here that don't have any clothes on. I'm like, okay, it was overwhelming, but there was something in me that went, wow. And there was also another piece of me that went, well, if his parents have this in their house, well, maybe my parents do. And I don't know why I made that association, but I did. And so I went home. I don't know if it was that day, but it was very short afterwards that I started looking around my parents' bedroom. And lo and behold, there it was. And that's how I got started with pornography. So when I got to college, I went to Los Angeles, and as a Midwestern boy, I was not ready for LA at 18 years old. I had friends who watched porn and, you know, went to clubs and things like that. So it just continued to grow. And, you know, I had relationships with females, and I always thought that it was just something they needed to deal with, that it was not my problem, that, you know, they can do whatever they want, take me or leave me, it's who I am. And, you know, that continued on for a long time. Every relationship I was in, there was always a problem, you know, from the female perspective. They were always upset and angry, and I'm like, just deal with it, it's who I am. And it was always a bone of contention.
And then the redhead came on the scene.
Yes.
And, you know, when I found out, I was in a place in my spiritual journey that it was like, oh man, that's a bummer, but it's okay because it's kind of normal and he'll grow out of it and it'll be okay. And it wasn't great. It wasn't something I was excited about, but he did minimalize it and say it's not a big deal. We weren't married yet. And then as our relationship grew and and then our spiritual relationships grew, I think is when I started to really feel like this is not right and something has to change.
Also at that point where I threw all the magazines out, I threw all the videos away, and that was a really, really good step. The internet was a problem, and that's why we took the steps of filtering and really putting up that hard boundary. And I really needed that. And at that point, it really was about me not wanting to lose this relationship with Lisa. I was scared. I was afraid what was going to happen. We're getting ready to be married. Is she going to go away? So it was more out of a fear and outside influence than a real change in my heart at that point.
When your spouse or your significant other looks at pornography, oftentimes women react that they feel like they're being cheated on, that they are literally choosing to go look at these naked women because they don't want me, or I'm not enough, or I'm not pretty enough, or skinny enough. And that's a lie. That's not why men do that. That's not why women look at pornography. It's not because their spouse is not enough. It is because something else is going on physically. There's been science about it, that it literally causes chemical reactions in their body that becomes an addiction, just like smoking and drugs.
What happened with my pornography is that it became my favorite way to medicate whatever emotion I was having. It became, when I was happy, when I was sad, when I was angry, any emotion, it would be the place I would go. It would be my outlet for numbing, really. I didn't know how to deal with anger very well. I didn't know how to deal when I got happy. I didn't talk about my feelings. I never talked about anything. And the pornography outlet pretty much sat on top of me as the place where I would go to find those things. But I didn't find anything. It just numbed me out to everything.
I realized one day that it wasn't who he was, and it was not even a choice that he was making. It was something that had a hold of him. That this addiction literally had a physical and spiritual hold of him, and that instead of allowing it to be something between me and him when it would come up and I'd be mad at him, I changed my perspective and I came along beside him and I put it in front of us. And I said, okay, we're gonna fight this thing together. And we're gonna find victory in this together. Because it's not you, it's not who you are, it's not how you were designed. It is truly something that has a hold of you.
Communicate better. And when I really started working on this outside thing, this pornography deal, I realized there were these other things. That was a secondary issue. I have some brokenness inside of myself that I have to deal with. I've got to deal with anger. I've got to deal with insecurity. I don't know who I am in Christ. I want to have a better relationship with God. And when I made that click in my head, that wasn't until 4 or 5 years after working on pornography. It was all about making you happy first. Yeah. But when I realized I want to have a better relationship with God, I want to be a better man, I want to be a better husband, I want to be a better father. I don't want to pass this on to my son. How do I do that? Well, it's not just not looking at something. It's about knowing who I am in Christ. It's about learning how to communicate. It's about learning how to forgive and ask for forgiveness. It's about, celebrating healthily together. And, learning that intimacy is more than just sex. It's being intimate on all different levels.
When he got to that place that it was no longer about me and just trying to make me happy, and it was really about him wanting to be a better man, I think that and us changing our perspective of how to approach it are really what started to give us breakthrough. One of the first things we realized is I could not be his accountability partner. So for us, one of the first things we had to do is get him plugged in somewhere. What worked well for you was Celebrate Recovery, which is a great venue. It's a Christian-based organization in a lot of churches. Just having men walking beside you, being able to hold you accountable, to encourage you, to start give you the skills to how to deal with stuff. And for me to also have women to walk with, to talk with. There's a lot of prayer during that time, but walking away had to not be an option. It had to be us changing our perspective of what the problem was. The problem was not you. It was something that had a hold of you. Yeah.
And so it just seems like God gave this to you and said, hey, don't look at him through this thing. Put it out in front of you and battle it together. Go after it this way. You need to be praying together. You need to be standing together. You do need to talk about it. You do need to be open and honest with one another. But you've got to have other friends outside of the marriage that will, listen and respond.
I think the other thing for me that really helped is I finally realized that I can't change you. And it's not my job to, it's not my responsibility to, and that I had to really, really just give you to God. I had to say at times, he's your mess, Lord. So you got to do something with him because I can't do it. And
one of the key pieces for me was learning who I was in Christ. I needed to know that I was a child of God. I needed to know that he is my Father. I needed to know that. And that has been a constant learning for me. Thinking about being a child of God and what does that mean? And if I am, how do I behave differently? And that changes everything inside. So when it went from being outside of me, someone else is gonna make me change, to, wait, who am I? Why am I doing this? I'm actually above this crazy behavior. I'm a child of God. I am loved. I am known. I confessed it. I talked about it to other people, and it's still a daily surrender to God for me. I am much, much, much better than I have been before. But I'm still blocking my eyes. I'm still watching what I look at. I'm still paying attention to things on television and going, maybe I shouldn't be watching that. Maybe I need to turn my eyes away from the lady jogging down the street. I don't want something to cause something to go off in me that I don't want to go off. I'm very careful about different things, and that's for me. Some people can never have an issue again. That's not how I'm wired. I need God. I need to lean on him daily.
I think the first step for a wife involved in this situation is realizing that it is not who her husband is. And it has nothing to do with her. That is so strange to wrap your mind around. He's looking at naked women, but it has nothing, it's no reflection of you and who you are as a woman. It is about something completely out of your control and completely out of your husband's control. So I think getting your head wrapped around that helps you to change positions, helps you to change seats from a victim and something that's victimizing you to a partner, somebody who can come alongside her husband and say, okay, let's figure out a plan. It might be putting a filter on a computer, it might be getting the computer out of the house. It might be having him call a friend, you call a friend. Whatever it is for your marriage to come together to work towards a solution and realize that it's a journey. It's not gonna happen just like that. It's not an immediate fix. You know, you said earlier that I would be hurt when you would tell me, but the more you told me, the further we went in the journey, the less it hurt and the more it ticked me off, not towards you, but towards the enemy. Because when it would happen, it was like, you better get away from my husband. You back off. You cannot have him. And that really came a long way for me instead of, I can't believe you chose that over me.
You know, what I would say is that you have to acknowledge it. And if you haven't thought about it before, for anybody who struggles with pornography, you have to acknowledge it. You have to say, wow, this is a real problem. And I did not do that for years. It's just the way I am. It's who I am. That's who I thought my identity was. It's not the case. You have to go, you know, this really is an issue. It's not just an issue for me, but it impacts this woman. If you want to have other relationships with other people, it impacts those relationships. It impacts work. It impacts everything you do. It takes up time. It takes up mental space. It takes up resources if you're spending money on it. So you have to acknowledge, I had to acknowledge, it's a problem. It's an issue. And things have to change. That is like a step before a step. You know, there's a real light bulb that goes, oh, this has to change. And then it's getting to a group of people who you can link arms with, you can stand with together and go, I'm having a tough day. Oh, I'm having a tough day. Oh, I'm not having a tough day. You guys can come talk to me. Oh, today's not my day, so I can encourage you. So that looks like recovery. It can be anonymous groups. It can be faith-based groups. There are lots of awesome groups that are coming up that in different communities that you can find to go to and just honestly talk to people who are struggling in the same area. And it really is being in a faith community and knowing people and being known is super important, not just for me, the one who struggles, but also for a wife, you know, who can talk to other people in her circles. You know, when you're having days where we're not together, you know, you can call someone as well. Finding new habits to take the place of the old habits. It really is closing down the computer when there is a problem. It really is making a phone call when there is a temptation. It really is praying. It really is getting up and going to ride a bicycle. You know, if that's your thing, it gets out the energy, that pent up thing that might be going on.
You know, during our journey, you started a blog. And a couple years later, that blog turned into a podcast. And so every week we get listener emails. People email us from all over the world with questions of stuff that they have going on in their marriage.
It does. And, you know, God's used our story. We do have a lot of listeners who have had this struggle of pornography and addiction. And they've asked those questions, but it's really nice to hear that, you know, we're not alone.
Yeah.
I think a big part of our story is we're not alone. Finding a community of people who can talk about what's going on in their marriage or what's going on in their life and, you know, bounce ideas. And then we've found that with our podcast, we'll answer a question, but it spurs a conversation in the listener. It spurs a conversation in the couple themselves. And they have a conversation and they get deeper and more connected. And that's super awesome to hear.